Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking, cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that's been haunting me ever since I read it. It's about a man whose trust was shattered by the one person he thought he could build a life with, right in the middle of expecting their first child. My name's Jonah. I'm 34 now, living in a quiet suburb just outside Asheville, North Carolina. A little over a year ago, I found out that my then-wife, Tessa, who was 30 at the time, had been cheating on me. She was 6 months pregnant with our daughter when the truth came out. And the worst part? It wasn't just a one-time thing. It had started months before and continued throughout her pregnancy. Tessa had her reasons, or at least excuses. She told me it had been a difficult time for her emotionally, that she'd felt neglected, alone. She begged me not to give up on our marriage. She wanted therapy. She wanted to stay together for our baby. But for me, cheating was something I couldn't recover from. I told her she was welcome to seek therapy, but I couldn't stay in a relationship where that kind of betrayal had taken root. So, we got divorced. The house we'd lived in together was actually mine before we got married. When we separated, Tessa moved back in with her parents, who had space to create a nursery for the baby and set her up in their guest room. We agreed on a 50-50 custody split once our daughter, Ivy, was born. Tessa would have her from Sunday to Wednesday. On Wednesdays, she'd drop Ivy off at daycare, and around noon, my nanny, Miss Lorraine, a kind woman in her early 60s from Georgia, would pick her up and bring her to my place. Ivy would stay with me until Saturday night or Sunday morning, depending on what worked best for both sides. But then Tessa started to complain. She said daycare was misplacing items she packed for Ivy, missing bottles, pacifiers, even tiny socks. She insisted it was better if she dropped Ivy off at my house directly to make sure everything arrived. So on her lunch breaks, she began swinging by my place and handing Ivy over in person. I worked from home on Wednesdays and Fridays, so I was always in the house, though usually tucked away in my office. At first, the drop-offs were uneventful. Tessa would arrive around 1:30, and Miss Lorraine would greet her at the door while I stayed in the background. But soon, Tessa said she didn't feel comfortable just handing things over to the nanny anymore. She wanted to speak with me directly, said she had things to say that she didn't want Miss Lorraine to forget to pass on. I tried to keep things civil. I still had a lot of pain, a lot of anger toward her, but I didn't want Ivy growing up in the shadow of that. So when I spoke to Tessa, I made it strictly about Ivy, nothing more. Then came today's drop-off. Ivy needed a diaper change, so Miss Lorraine took her upstairs. That left me alone in the foyer with Tessa. She asked how I was doing. I said I was fine, thanked her, and turned to head back to my office. Then, out of nowhere, she snapped. "You know, I'm getting really sick of your attitude." Before I could even ask what she meant, she launched into a tirade, accusing me of emotionally manipulating her, of being cold and distant on purpose. She said I was punishing her forever for a mistake, and that my hatred toward her was no different than hating Ivy. I stood there in silence, just letting her speak. Then, once she was done, I told her calmly that it was time for her to leave. And she did. But I was left standing there, with all those words hanging heavy in the air. I think I need to go no contact again, at least for drop-offs. Maybe it's time we go back to having Miss Lorraine handle everything. I don't want to be cruel, but I also can't keep putting myself in these situations that rip open old wounds. And just in case anyone's wondering, yes, I did get a paternity test. I waited until Ivy was born, but once the cheating came to light, I had to be sure. She's mine, no question. There's a bitter irony in how Tessa calls me manipulative, then in the next breath tries to guilt me into reconciling. How can I be manipulating her by setting boundaries while she's the one crossing them, showing up to my home and trying to have emotional conversations in the name of co-parenting? I know she's trying to find a way back in. But the door is shut now. Not locked, not bolted, but it's no longer hers to walk through. Not after what she did. What matters now is Ivy, her stability, her peace. And for that, I need to be stronger than the part of me that still aches. The hardest thing about co-parenting after betrayal isn't the logistics. It's the silence, the heavy, echoing silence where there used to be laughter, shared plans, quiet moments on the couch while the baby kicked inside her belly. Now, all that's left is a thin thread of civility stretched taut between two people who once thought they'd grow old together. Tessa doesn't understand that anymore. Or maybe she refuses to. What she calls talking, I see for what it really is. Attempts to pull me back in. And I can't go back. Not to that version of our life. Not after what she did. If she wants this co-parenting relationship to survive, barely even, she needs to stop reaching for things that aren't hers anymore. No more casual chats. No more asking how I'm doing when she's not prepared to face the truth. Just Ivy. Only Ivy. That's all we have left tying us together. After our last drop-off turned sour, I decided to seek outside advice. Sometimes you need voices other than your own to remind you what boundaries look like when your heart keeps second-guessing them. One comment stood out. Someone said, "Even with shared custody, minimal contact is best. You don't owe her emotional access. Be a stone wall. Handle business. Nothing else." Another suggested that Tessa might be trying to rekindle something. That maybe, in her mind, these brief drop-offs are openings, moments where she might see a spark in my eyes that isn't there anymore. But it's not reconciliation I want, it's peace, and distance is the only way I know how to keep that peace. I replied, saying I can still be in the same room with her. I can be civil, calm, but I can't make small talk. I can't be her friend. That version of us doesn't exist anymore. Another commenter shared a more practical strategy. They recommended a parenting app designed specifically for strained co-parenting dynamics, where all communication is monitored, recorded, and flagged for toxicity. It forces you to be direct, factual, and avoid arguments. It keeps things businesslike, which is what this needs to be now. Business, not emotion. They also suggested public drop-off and pickup spots, neutral places where emotions don't echo off the walls like they do in my foyer, a community center, a library parking lot, or even the lobby of a police station. And if, for some reason, it has to happen at home again, then no crossing the threshold. She's not welcome inside like she used to be. Not anymore. There was one more comment that hit a nerve. It was from someone whose brother-in-law went through something eerily similar. His ex would use their daughter to communicate her wishes, putting the child in the middle of adult choices. If he said no, he looked like the bad guy. If he said yes, he'd given in to manipulation. In the end, the court had to step in and mandate a third-party communication system. Everything had to be written, documented, and reviewed by someone impartial. That way, there were no false claims, no weaponized texts, no he said, she said, just facts. And honestly, it made sense. So I took the advice. First, I want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to offer their stories, their advice, their support. I didn't get a chance to reply to each comment, but I read every single one, and I felt less alone reading them. One suggestion in particular stuck with me, a site called Talking Parents. It's a co-parenting platform that logs every message, flags inappropriate language, and keeps things strictly about the child. I signed up. So did Tessa. She wasn't thrilled, but she agreed. Then I sat her down. I told her I needed to speak, not as her ex, not as the man she hurt, but as the father of the daughter we both love. I told her that the pain hasn't gone away. that there's still bitterness and betrayal simmering under the surface, but I also told her that I would never, ever let those feelings bleed into how we raise Ivy. And to make sure of that, we needed clear boundaries. We're going back to the original plan. She'll drop Ivy off at daycare on Wednesdays. Miss Lorraine will pick her up. That's it. No more drop-offs at my door. No more trying to chat in my living room. I said all of this gently, but firmly. And though I saw the disappointment in her eyes, I didn't waver. Tessa still wants something from me I no longer have to give. But what I can give, and will, is respect. For Ivy's sake. For my own peace. That has to be enough. Tessa didn't take it well. After I explained, calmly and gently, that we were returning to the original plan, Wednesday morning drop-offs at Ivy's daycare with Miss Lorraine picking her up in the afternoon, she went quiet. I could see the shift in her eyes, that wounded flicker of hope extinguishing, but it had to be done. We had to create space or we were going to keep falling into the same traps. I told her we'd use Talking Parents from now on. That app would be the only way we'd communicate, strictly about Ivy. Which items to send, what time for pickup, reminders about doctor's appointments. No more hallway conversations. No more soft, lingering glances like she expected the past to undo itself. Tessa didn't argue. Not really. She just looked tired and disappointed. I don't doubt that she had been coming to my house with some quiet hope that reconciliation might be on the table, that with enough shared glances or small conversations, I'd remember what we once were. But I haven't forgotten. That's the problem. I reminded her, kindly but firmly, that there was no path back to us. That door had closed when trust was shattered. I told her I meant no cruelty, only clarity. I wanted to co-parent with her, well, even. I wanted us to be the kind of team Ivy could depend on, even if we couldn't be anything more. And if time softened the pain, maybe someday we could be, not friends exactly, but something more human than what we are now. She nodded, but I don't think she believed me. Not then. To everyone who took the time to respond to my earlier posts, thank you. You helped more than you know. Reading through your experiences, your advice, even just your shared pain, it grounded me. This community reminded me that I'm not alone in this grief, and that being firm in boundaries doesn't make you heartless. It makes you responsible. I don't know what happens next. I hope Tessa respects the new lines we've drawn, but some of you wrote in and warned me that this might not be the end, that people like her, people still grasping for a future that doesn't exist, don't let go easily. You might be right, but for now, it's quiet, and I'll hold on to that silence for as long as it lasts. Let's move into another story now. This one stings differently. It's about a father, a daughter, and the distance that can grow when love is buried beneath belief. My name's Marcus. I'm 42, and I live in Spokane, Washington. My daughter, Leela, is 16, and for the past year, I've been watching my wife slowly push her away, not because she's done anything wrong, but because of who she loves. Leela came out to me first. One quiet night in the living room, she told me she liked girls. Her voice trembled when she said it, but her eyes didn't waver. I hugged her and told her I loved her. Nothing would change that. Later that week, the two of us sat down with my wife Meredith to tell her the news. Meredith didn't yell. She didn't say anything cruel. She just stared at Leela with this distant disappointment and didn't say a word. And somehow that silence hurt more than anything. I told her afterwards, this isn't something to be fixed. It's not our place to shame our daughter for who she is, but Meredith couldn't let it go. Over the next few months, she started showing Leela Christian dating apps, all with boys. She told her to give it a try. She pushed her to go out with the son of a friend from church. When she said no, Meredith said things I'll never forgive. That she wasn't normal, that she needed to confess, that this was just a phase. Leela kept it all from me for a while. Meredith made sure to act sweet when I was around, but eventually the weight of it all cracked my daughter open. She broke down one night and told me everything. I didn't sleep for days. I moved into the guest room. I couldn't even look at my wife. We tried marriage counseling, but Meredith didn't change. If anything, she just got better at hiding the cruelty. Her comments didn't stop, they just got quieter. And then came the night Leela introduced us to her girlfriend. She wanted me there, only me. She didn't trust her mother to keep quiet, to be kind. Meredith was furious, said she couldn't believe she was being excluded. But I told her the truth. This is what she created. And until she learns to love her daughter without conditions, she doesn't get a seat at that table. She cried, but I didn't comfort her, because this time the tears weren't from pain. They were from consequence. People said I was being too harsh, that I wasn't considering Tessa's beliefs, her background, her struggle. Even some of my family said I was being cruel for not giving her more time. But how much time does it take to stop hurting your own child? Tessa claims she's trying, that she's doing her best to accept things she was raised to condemn. She tells me she's always believed in God, always followed the rules of her church, and that this revelation, our daughter's identity, is testing everything she thought she knew. But that doesn't excuse how she's treated Ivy. It's been over a year, and still, instead of showing Ivy love, she shows her shame. That's not trying. That's hiding behind doctrine to justify damage. I've tried to understand, truly. I grew up with religion too, but what good is faith if it drives a wedge between a parent and their child? If it makes you see love, real, honest love, as something that needs to be fixed? Someone asked me online if I'd ever considered divorce. The answer, yes. I came close more than once. I even had the paperwork half filled out. But every time I stopped myself, for Ivy's sake, I wanted to talk to her first. When my own parents divorced, they didn't tell me until everything had already changed. I hated that. So I promised myself I wouldn't do that to Ivy. Before I made any decision, I sat her down. We talked for hours. She cried not because she was afraid of the divorce, but because she felt stuck in between. She said if we separated, she'd want to live with me, but a small part of her still held hope. Hope that if we stayed, maybe her mom would change. Maybe having us together would push her to try harder, to see Ivy for who she is and not what she's afraid of. I couldn't ignore that. So we paused. Tried therapy, individual, marital, family. We went through the motions. Tessa showed up to appointments, nodded when the counselor spoke, but nothing really changed. Not in the ways that mattered. Ivy stopped expecting apologies. She stopped waiting for affection. I think that hurt the most. Watching my daughter lower her expectations of her own mother just to protect herself.
Eventually, I realized I wasn't helping, that staying was just stretching the pain thinner, not healing it. I told myself I was doing the adult thing by staying, but really, I was just afraid of pulling the last thread that connected us all. But I couldn't keep Ivy in limbo, so I sat Tessa down one final time. I told her 3 things. First, that she needed to get therapy, real therapy, with someone neutral, someone who wouldn't side with either of us but would help her see beyond her own pain. I said I wouldn't be attending with her. This was something she had to do on her own. Second, I told her that if she continued down this path, this cold, dismissive treatment of Ivy, she would destroy any chance at a relationship with her. As a mother, her job is to protect, not to be the reason her child needs protection. And third, I told her that I wouldn't clean up the mess anymore, that if she wanted to fix what she broke, it had to come from her. No more shielding her, no more explaining her words to Ivy in softer tones. We are getting a divorce. She didn't take it well. I didn't expect her to. Afterward, I sat Ivy down and told her the truth, that we were ending the marriage, that none of this was her fault, that it never had been. I told her she had choices now, that she didn't have to put herself through painful dinners or silent car rides just to keep peace. If she wanted to see her mom less, that was okay. If she wanted to try and rebuild something with her later, I'd support her. But it would never be her job to fix what Tessa had broken. She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. She said she was sad, but also relieved. I think deep down she had been waiting for me to choose her fully. And this finally felt like that choice. I moved out not long after, rented a small house just a few miles from her school. I stayed in a hotel at first while I waited for the paperwork to process. During that time, Ivy stayed with my brother for a few days, had a little break from all of it. Once I had the keys, we got to work. Ivy helped decorate her new room, purple walls, string lights, posters of her favorite bands. For the first time in months, she smiled and meant it. I got her into therapy, too. A safe space just for her. Somewhere she could unravel all the knots this past year had tied around her heart. And me? I'm just trying to give her peace, a place to breathe, a home that doesn't demand she hide any part of herself. She deserves that much, at the very least. Even after everything, Tessa didn't stop. She told Ivy she was going to hell. She said it to her face, loud, cruel, and unfiltered. And then, like she could undo the wounds with a text message, she followed up later with soft words and voicemails pretending to be the kind of mother Ivy has always needed but never truly had. She called me abusive, said I was manipulating Ivy, said I was forcing her into being gay. She even accused me of turning my back on God. And then came the worst part. She threatened to take Ivy away from me, permanently. She treated my support for our daughter like a challenge to conquer, not a reality to accept. And I think deep down she truly believed she could wear me down, that if she just shouted loud enough, smeared me deeply enough, someone, anyone, would take her side. But truth has weight. And eventually it begins to settle. I gave Ivy the choice, stay with me full-time or do 50-50. She thought about it for a few days. Then one morning over breakfast, she told me she wanted to stay here. She'd still visit her mom, maybe on weekends, but no more sleepovers, no more long nights in a house where she had to hold her breath to exist. I respected her decision. And since then, her girlfriend has been around the house more often. The two of them laugh in the kitchen, study at the dining room table, sneak glances and blush. And in those moments, Ivy seems free. Not like she's pretending or shrinking to make someone else comfortable, but like she's finally allowed to take up space. Things are still hectic. The divorce is ongoing. But we've moved out. We're in therapy. And every day I remind her this isn't your fault. It never was. And it's not your responsibility to make it better either. There were parts of the story I didn't include before, mostly because even typing them made my hands shake. But yes, we have proof of the insults, the shaming, the attempts to fix Ivy. She started recording some of it on her own phone. I have recordings too, things Tessa said to me when she didn't think she'd be held accountable. Conversations that started as talks about schedules and turned into accusations and venom. And those dating apps weren't just boys from youth group, like Tessa claimed. They were grown men, legal adults. One was 27, another 33. She admitted it, on tape while defending her actions as if this was all a rational attempt at guidance. Thank God I had the recorder running. We've compiled everything: texts, voicemails, app history, call logs. I'm documenting every exchange with her now, every pickup and drop-off, every email, every word, because I know how far she's willing to go. And if this ends up in court, and it will, I want every judge, every lawyer, every guardian ad litem to see exactly what we've been living with. Right now, Ivy is with me full-time. And barring some extraordinary, impossible circumstance, there's almost no way Tessa can win custody. The burden of proof would fall on her, and all she has are vague claims and a desperate attempt to reframe her cruelty as righteousness. Even when asked directly why Ivy shouldn't be with me, the best she can come up with is, he's making her think she's gay. It's maddening, but it's also fragile. Lies tend to crack under pressure. Still, someone asked online how I managed to move so quickly, how I filed for divorce, found a house, and built something stable in what seemed like no time. The answer is, I didn't have a choice. I never said everything was finalized. There's still a long road ahead: court dates, hearings, mediation. But I needed a home, fast. And yes, you can get a house in a few weeks if you're prepared. I couldn't keep Ivy in limbo, couldn't stay in a hotel for months, couldn't move in with my brother, his situation's complicated, and I sure as hell wasn't stepping foot back into Tessa's house. I had to show stability. I had to give my daughter a room that was hers, a bed she could sleep in without tension, a space where love didn't come with disclaimers. We're not finished, not by a long shot, but we've taken the steps, we've moved out, filed the papers, started therapy, built something out of the rubble. And I tell Ivy every single day, this isn't your burden. You don't have to fix this. You just have to live. Freely, openly, fully. That's all I want for her now. A life she doesn't have to survive, but one she can finally call her own. There were a few people who mentioned that we rarely had the chance to go to that restaurant, but often visited other places nearby, places with broader menus where everyone could find something. Jonah had tried to make compromises. He asked if maybe the kitchen could prepare the fish or chicken plain, without sauces or marinades. I told him I didn't want to be a burden to the staff. His next idea was that I come along, just order dessert, and once everyone was done eating, he'd take me to another place for dinner. He was really trying, but I kept thinking about how awkward I'd feel, sitting there hungry, trying to fake a smile while everyone else enjoyed their meal. So I told him I wasn't going. He asked me again, softly, one last time, if I'd reconsider. Said he wanted to celebrate this with the people who mattered most to him. I told him no, that he needed to go before he was late. He didn't argue, just nodded, grabbed his keys, and left with the kids. He came back a little over an hour later. Ivy had a takeout box in her hands. So did he. So did our son. None of them had eaten inside. He said they just stood around in the parking lot with his parents for a bit, trying to enjoy the moment without making it worse. He told me he couldn't find a way to explain my absence to the kids without either lying or making me look bad. So he simply packed up their meals and brought them home. I told him he should have stayed, but he said I'd put him in a difficult position, that he just wanted us all to be together, and maybe I should have let go of my preferences for one night. Maybe I should have made space for his happiness. But I told him if it truly mattered that much, he would have picked a restaurant with more variety. He didn't argue. He just looked tired. In a way, we both felt hurt by each other. He thought I was being selfish. I thought he wasn't considering me. But maybe what hurt most was how easily we let something small become something bigger than it ever should have been. This was his night, and I stayed home. One comment online stuck with me. They said, "It's not that there was nothing you could eat, it's that there was nothing you wanted." They were right. I could have made it work. I just didn't want to bend that night. I don't even know why anymore. He'd made compromises for me, time and time again, and when it came time for me to return the gesture, I didn't. I let my discomfort win. Looking back, it wasn't about food. It was about presence, and I wasn't there. Stories like this one remind us that emotional distance doesn't always begin with grand betrayals. Sometimes it grows slowly from unspoken resentment, unmet expectations, or moments where ego quietly trumps empathy. In relationships, it's easy to get caught up in being right and forget the deeper value of being together. If you found yourself pulling away from a partner not out of cruelty but exhaustion or pride, it may be time to step back and ask, what truly matters here? Is the discomfort you're feeling worth the distance it might create? Compromise isn't weakness. It's a form of love. And while self-respect is essential, relationships require us to stretch a little for one another. Not every time, but sometimes. If you're navigating conflict in your own relationship, try to separate what's important from what's just familiar. Seek to understand before you defend. And if your partner reaches out, like Jonah did, meet them halfway before the silence becomes permanent. Love isn't just about the big gestures. It's also about showing up, even when the menu isn't quite what you had in mind.